The goal of Data Transformers podcast is to accelerate digital transformation by bridging the gap between business outcomes and rapidly advancing technologies. And we aim to bridge this gap by focusing on data. I am Peggy Sai, top 50 women in tech influencer, co-author of the AI book, and data governance expert.
I'm Ramesh Danta, an entrepreneur, a tech blogger, and AI enthusiast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Data Transformers with Peggy Sai. That's me. I'm a data practitioner turned data podcast host. And
the co-host, Ramesh Danta. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm an author, practicing data management analytics professional.
For today's episode, I'm really pleased to have Abel Aboh from EasyJet. He's a data management lead. Thank you, Abel, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to talk a little bit about what company you work at and what you do at that company?
Okay, so I think so I would say that EasyJet is my former employer at the moment. So I'm in the transition to get into where I would certainly disclose my new employer. However,
okay.
Just the last couple of months, and over a year, I was working for EasyJet, where I was part of the team, leading the data management, embedding data management into the organization. For those of you that don't know who EasyJet is, EasyJet is a low-cost carrier in the UK and predominantly in Europe. If you ever use a plane in Europe, you definitely see the orange planes, and that's EasyJet. It's one of the FTSE 100 organization in the UK, just over 20 years old, but really doing really remarkably. But unfortunately, the coronavirus has really caused a bit of a strain for the airline industry and the travel industry, as you know.
So, Abel, do you want to disclose on this podcast who your new employer is?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to do that, but I think the next couple of months, people certainly that's following me on LinkedIn or connect with me on Twitter will certainly be able to know that. I would love to do it, but I don't think I'm in the position at the moment to disclose. But certainly, I would do that for those people. Check me out in the next couple of weeks or so. You would definitely find an update as well concerning that subject matter.
That's fine.
Definitely stay tuned. So, Abel, I've been actually following you on LinkedIn because there's just so much wealth of knowledge. You really established yourself as a data management professional and expert. Can you talk a little bit more about your other data governance experience prior to EasyJet?
Yeah, so I think my journey has been quite exceptional. I'll use that word. And because I went to uni, so I studied human resource management, and that's where I did my first degree in University of Lincoln. And then I went over to Strathclyde Business School in Glasgow to study human resource management as well. I did work in different organizations. I've worked across different sectors, doing human resources. But I think just about 8 years ago, I joined an organization which is one of the one of the top defense contractor in the UK, which is called BAE Systems. I was part of the Navy ship business, but doing HR in that business, and they were looking for a couple of people to come into a transformation space to help them embed some new transformation, what the business was thinking about, and data management was one of them. So I was chosen because I think I do understand the business from a people point of view, and obviously I'm passionate about technology, but I also recognize the value data can bring. So I was part of the team that was asked to embed data governance and data quality, and in essence, data management as a business capability. And we did that from a POC, proof of concept, to business as usual. The journey took us just about 5 years, and after then I moved over to the financial services, where I briefly spent about 8 or 9 months there working for HSBC and Global, HSBC, and obviously in London, in Canary Wharf, the head office there. And after that, then I moved over to EasyJet as well. So I've been lucky coming from HR, but more importantly, then diving into data management and just seeing the value data can bring into organization. And I'm super excited about it. I'm really passionate about the profession, to be honest.
That's a great transition coming from a HR background. So it's fascinating that Peggy and I are talking to different professionals. Some started from a technical background like a computer science, and then people like you, HR. That proves the point that this whole data governance, data management is about people, process, and technology. That means you can come from any one of those backgrounds and become a good data management, data governance professional. So you really prove that point.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yes, and that's why I say to people, just be passionate about it. Data. When I was coming into the space, someone once told me that data is a thing. It's just about context, basically. So once you understand that from an abstract point of view, you just need to understand the business, you understand the people, you understand the process and the technology, and then I think you should be fine, to be honest. And yeah, those are the core things. I would say the core pillars to help you in your data journey profession or data journey agenda or whatever you want to do, if that's what you want to do, basically.
Yep.
But going back to you originally started in HR, and I know that when I've done data governance projects, HR has always been, one of the core champions of data governance, because if you don't have good data on your employees, it's really hard to run an operation. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the data challenges perhaps you saw in HR that kind of spurned your love for data governance?
Yeah, I think that's a good one because I was, in terms of my journey being in, data management, I've worked in two roles where specifically I've been involved in HR, doing data management as well. So my previous role with HSBC, which is a global organization, they just got a new technology, and they just want to make sure that in order to optimize the technology, they need to manage their data properly. And so they brought people like myself in order to support that. And I think it's very important. You might be running a global organization of 300,000 K people in over 60 countries, or you might be running an organization that, is people or 10 people. In as much as you want to draw some insight from your people, I think data is fundamental. And then in EasyJet, my former employer, as I just mentioned earlier, we did a project for them, which was just helping them understand the starter, mover, and lever business processes, and understanding their data, understanding the processes, understanding what are the critical elements of the data there, and then measuring the data, putting some governance in place as well. And I think that it brings really value because for HR, it's not just about managing people. You've got to understand the people from a data point of view, and not just the people specifically, but also the other business processes as well that supports the people to deliver their day-to-day roles and responsibility. So I think data drives most of these things anyway. When you're talking about, let's just take, for example, a recruitment process. Okay, you need to capture data. You need to send data to internal, external parties as well. It just depends what the organization is doing. So data is key. Data obviously is used within processes, and HR is not any different from other operations as well, like engineering, ops, finance, and every other functions in the business.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Peggy that the employee, the human resources is a key function, where data plays a very key role. So, and the other thing that, so when Peggy said, hey, we are going to bring Abel onto the show, then I started looking into, your passion for data. One of the things that you've sent out to us to look at what we are calling them Abel's 10 commandments of data management and data governance. So you want to talk about your 10 commandments, Abel?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think for the last couple of years now, I've just been advocating because I always say to, being in the trenches, I've learned a thing or two. We got data management, and because I'm passionate about data management, I felt that I think it's important to have my voice with the conversation around just getting professionals, and for those people that are already in, to think about it strategically and operationally, but also to think about it tactically as well. And for those people that are looking to come into the space, for them to understand the key ingredients that is needed for them to be successful to deliver any data proposition. So for me, the first thing is people. You need to have the right team. You need to have a blend of business and technical acumen. And you need to have people that understand psychology, that understand people, from an emotional point of view as well, because that's fundamental, because you're working with people. The second thing for me is communication. Communication is key. I always say to people, make sure you don't drop the communication ball, because communication is fundamental. The way I look at communication for me is the same level with people. You have to make sure that you're good in your communication in the business and outside the business, so that your key stakeholders understand what you're doing, what you're about to do, and what you're delivering. The third thing for me is change management. Data management for me, a big part of data management is also change management, because you're changing behaviors as well. So you've got to understand the principle around change management. You can then take those practices as well. The fourth thing for me also is around framework. You cannot deliver data management without frameworks. You've got to have some specific framework. So for example, you can have organizational framework. So for example, you can have a measurement framework. If you want to do a data quality, you've got to have a measurement framework where you need to measure your dimensions and your measures and what you need to do, and you need to communicate that as well. The fifth thing for me is that you've got to think about a blueprint, and what I call a blueprint, some people call it an enterprise view. What that means is you've got to have a bedside view of your data and your landscape. So in terms of architecture, or where your data sits and all that, so you can focus on what you need to do. So you have to do that incrementally. The sixth thing for me is technology. I think technology is important. I always say to people, technology is just an enabler. People make technology work, but you need to make sure you're sourcing the right technology for your estate. You need to make sure you're sourcing the right technology for your architecture. You need to make sure you're sourcing the right technology that works for your organization. Because there are loads of vendors out there. The seventh thing for me, I always tell people to think about basically sponsorship. And sponsorship is really important. So most people will talk about senior sponsorship, but I say to them, get the senior sponsorship, but more importantly, think about middle management as well, because middle management can support you to do the heavy lifting in organization. The eighth thing for me, I always talk about when I think about this, is around accessibility. People should be able to have access to your team. Your team should be positioned in the business where people understand where you are, and then they can have access to you. They can have access to your report. They can have access to your dashboard. It could be a governance dashboard. It could be a business glossary. It could be a data dictionary. Whatever you want to put out, people should be able to access that within the business as easy as possible. The ninth for me, it's I call it active listening. I realize that sometimes, because most data management people are coming from technical background, the soft skill around able to listen to people, to understand what they're saying, so that you can able to capture their requirements and understand what you can deliver for them is key. So if you don't listen to them properly, then you can't understand what they're trying to say to you, or you won't be able to deliver to them. And I think that's absolutely critical. The 10th for me is about support. Sometimes we feel that we're too self-reliant on ourselves. We need to go out in the business. We need to ask people for support. We need to speak to the IT team to give us support. We need to speak to the operation team to give us support. So for me, if you can do those 10 things very well, I think you can deliver any business, any data management proposition, to be honest. So yes, is my 10 commandments, but I'm really readily always wanting to talk about those things and making sure that I'm joining my voice to the conversation to help data management professional all over the world, basically.
Abel, thank you so much. Those are really fantastic 10 tips. And actually, while you were rattling them off, I was like, wow, first of all, you know them. Those are all the tip of your fingers. And I actually had a few questions I wanted to ask you. First of all, it sounds like some of your tips overlap the concept of data culture and data literacy. Would you agree? And would you actually
Absolutely
use those terminologies, those words as well in your 10 commandments?
Yeah, I think one of the key things we struggle with within the space at the moment is around terminology. We don't agree on what is what. But I think we're maturing and now we start thinking about it strategically and holistically. I think that's good. But before we get there, I think you're right. Data literacy as well is important because it's around taking someone that's not familiar, that don't understand data nomenclature, that don't understand data properties, that don't understand nothing about data, but able to embrace it. And I think it's about the people. It's about the human being. It's not about the machine. It's about the human being. And if we can get our head around those human beings and how we can work with them, how we can change them, how we can take them from a denial stage to acceptance stage, for example, just using change curve as an example, I think we will definitely make progress. So data culture, data literacy, all those things, fanciful words, but in practicality, if we can do those little bits and bobs I just talked about, you certainly be able to deliver the data proposition. And more importantly, you can improve on the data culture and the data literacy vis-a-vis.
Yeah. See, Abel, one of the things Peggy and I are trying to accomplish through this podcast is essentially bridge the gap between the business goals or business outcomes and the technology initiatives, right? So more often than not, what happens is the stakeholders, each of them are thinking from their own perspectives, right? So if the business people increase the revenue, reduce the cost, more efficient in organization, technology professionals like how can I implement latest technology, latest whatever that is, right? So uh, more often than not, there's a gap between them, right? So given your 10 commandments or the things that you really live by, and then coming from HR background, so the question that I have for you, whether the BAE systems where you started off, there, what were the business outcomes were you asked or were you focusing on in accomplishing using data as the glue?
Okay, so for my experience, you just using and BAE as an example, one of the key things they wanted to do was they wanted to deliver the product on time, on budget, okay, and they want to make sure that it's right first time and on schedule. On schedule is very important for them because we're talking about multi-billion dollar project basically,
Mhm.
and most of the money comes from the taxpayers. So the government needs to show value for money basically. And in order to do that, they've got a bunch of massive engineering team. If you've been in an engineering organization, they are so fragmented. So you've got what they call a stage one engineering, stage two engineering, stage three engineering. People are designing the concept, people are looking to do some you know designs in terms of cad models, and people are looking to then going down to the factory to create that thing that's been designed already. So there are different levels, but more importantly, I think because they use data, what our purpose was, how can these people do this right first time, number one? How can they ensure that the quality is right? Okay. And
Mhm.
how can they ensure that they deliver it on the right time, where based on the plan? So you've got a plan there, you've got to deliver on your program plan, and when you deliver on your program plan, you deliver on the milestones. And everything I've just talked about, data is all part of it.
Okay.
Because if you have the planning data, you have what the engineers are doing, you have the data, you make sure that the data is of the right quality because it's been controlled, managed, and assessed, right? Then you can have confidence in the output of the engineering teams. And when they deliver the output, so the guy that is going to go down to the factory or the production line to build that thing would have confidence as well. So they're not going to get there and then go back to change anything, because whatever they're given is 100% complete. So I think data helps you to give that confidence as well. And one of the things I say to people about, three things for me I always talk about when I talk about data management is important to data should help you to know something, data should help you to trust something, and data should help you to use that thing confidently. So if you can do those three things, then you're good. But if you're struggling to do one or two of them, then you just need to ask yourself the question if you're actually delivering value for any business.
That's actually great. Know your data, trust it, and be able to use it consistently and accurately. So, Abel, for those of those of people in the audience, hopefully, we have a global audience for this podcast. I've mostly worked in like U.S. companies, financial services. You have more, you've worked in various industries in the UK. I'm just curious your thoughts on the data maturity level overall in general for the organizations you worked at. Do you feel they have repeatable and defined processes, or do you think there's still a larger gap or a laggard compared to other regions?
I think for me, because sometimes with data, it's all about the sector you're in terms of industry as well. For engineering, you have to deal with loads of data basically, and for retail, you have to deal with loads of data, and sometimes the velocity of that data is really different. People have been bound in the word big data. I think in most industry, you have the ability to engage in big data in terms of the velocity, in terms of the volume of the data, and I think it's just about to understand your organization, understand this industry. And one of the things I always talk about with data management is around understanding the standards as well. What is the standard you're trying to adhere to? So for financial services, there are loads of regulations that you need to adhere to. Some of the regulations are coming from the federal bank or federal bank. Some of the regulations are coming from the financial regulators as well. Some of the regulations are coming from whatever it is. So understanding that reg is important, making sure that you're delivering, because sometimes some of them come with fines as well if you're unable to deliver. However, I think just from a UK point of view, I see there's been a massive increase in every sector where they've got customer. It could be internal customer, external customer. For example, with EasyJet, they've got multiple or many channels on how you can engage with them, how you can book a ticket, how you can hire a car, what you can do, the different transaction, and each of this transaction does an exchange of data. So the customer is extending their data, the business is capturing the data, and that's one of the great things about understanding the data life cycle as well. So for some organization, once they capture the data, they are mandated to send the data outside their organization, in a more secure way as well. So really and truly, I don't see any industry in the UK or across the world at the moment where there's not been an increase in data. I think the challenge is, how are you going to know it? How are you going to trust it? How are you going to use it? I think that's the challenge. That's where most organizations are failing, and that's the reason why they're relying on people like us, data management professionals to come in and help them.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard today and would like to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite player like iTunes and Spotify. And please do rate our podcast. Also, please go to our website, www.datatransformerspodcast.com, for more episodes, blogs, and information on our speakers. Thank you.